We have just gotten the brand new MW3 Zombies story cutscene for Season 3 Reloaded when you complete the brand new mission, Union, which appears to be the final Act 4 mission, so this means that for future missions, if we are going to be getting one or more, we're not entirely sure, but they apparently seemingly will be within Act 5. It is rumored that we might just be getting one more story mission in Season 5 and there may not be one in Season 4 or 6, but this isn't confirmed, this is just data mine information. Maybe there are going to be 3 in Act 5 in total, we will have to wait and see. Nevertheless, this story mission was probably the best one yet, not just in terms of the cutscene, which is absolutely mind-blowing, and that's what I'm going to be breaking down in this video and explaining for you, but the mission itself I felt like was the best one in the Dark Ether yet. The other ones we have gotten in the prior seasons just felt a lot more generic, had a lot more wasted time. This one was pure action from the get-go. It still was pretty mundane and pretty basic, I think all of these missions are, to be honest, and they're not very replayable. They're kind of just one and done things, but I definitely thought this was an improvement over the prior ones. Now I'm going to play the full cutscene for you now so you can listen and enjoy it, and then I'll jump back to try and explain everything from my perspective for you like I always do with these cutscenes. I think I'm literally the only one who's done a breakdown for every single cutscene. I don't know why people seem very disengaged with this story. Yes, on the surface not much is going on, but I think there's so many interesting implications for COD 2024 Black Ops 6 Zombies. So I'll shut up now, let you listen if you haven't seen it already, and then I'll be back in a second. Enjoy.
We almost lost you, Eva. Your obsession with Gray's research almost got you killed. It is too dangerous to keep this from you anymore.
What is it?
Gray's last words to you.
Ava. I went through this in my head so many times, but I'm still not sure what to say. But I can't do what I need to without trying to talk to you, even if it's just to say goodbye. I carried you, I gave birth to you, but your biological mother was Samantha Maxis. She was the kindest, bravest soul I have ever met, and I miss her so much. We were all exposed to the Dark Ether, Sam most of all. One day she went into the Dark Ether and didn't come back. This is why you are so important. You are bonded to the Dark Ether. It's in your genes. No one knows whether that could be something wonderful or something dangerous. We are dying, but we can ensure that someone will watch over you. We agreed Ravenov would be the best choice, especially given his connection to you. I know the Jansens will have given you the best life, but giving you up at only 3 years old, I am so sorry. I'd like to hope there's a part of you that will remember me.
There is.
I love you, Ava. Goodbye.
How could you not tell me the truth?
I did not choose to be your father.
My father? Do you even think of me as a daughter? Or am I more of a liability?
Requiem took genetic samples from all of us, with or without our consent.
Who the fuck did you people think you were to make these decisions?
The entity. It is a reflection of you, a shadow, born the same moment you were. And every time the veil between this world and the Dark Ether is lifted, its influence grows stronger. Please, you need to let me help you.
Help me. All you've done is lie.
Wait. Eva! I'm sorry.
So there are a boatload of revelations within this cutscene. The first thing I want to mention is the fact that it is confirmed, just like I had speculated in prior videos, that the entity inside of the Dark Ether is actually a mirrored version of Dr. Ava Jansen herself. They are one and the same people, trapped between two different realms, essentially separated at birth. They are essentially twin sisters. Now, Ava Jansen has been hearing this entity since she was a child, and she has lots of amnesia. She doesn't really remember things exactly clearly, but the entity has been talking to her through hallucinations like we saw within Season 2's cutscene. This entity lured her and persuaded her to come into the Dark Ether, which sets up the stage for this mission, because then Ravenov and co go to try and rescue her. Now, honestly, I thought within this mission itself that Ava would reform with the entity, considering that they're two sides of the same coin. And even the mission itself is called Union, so I thought that there would be this union between Ava and the entity where they would rejoin, but it doesn't seem to be the case, or at least I don't think so. Maybe there's something unbeknownst to us that has happened here. Nevertheless, if they have recombined here, or whether it's going to happen in the future, it's going to happen at some point. Maybe that's going to be the final story mission we will receive, and we will then have to fight her / the entity as the final boss fight. Now, interestingly enough, Ravenov says the entity, it is a reflection of you, a shadow, born the same moments you were, and every time the veil between the world and the Dark Ether is lifted, its influence grows stronger. Now, I find this interesting because that's kind of how the Dark Ether was described back in the old Ether story. It was a shadow that placed below creation, and that's a good way of looking at Ava and the entity. The entity is her shadow, but I find it interesting that apparently the entity was created the very moment Ava Jansen was similarly. So literally the second either she was born or was conceived in cell form or within the womb, this entity cropped up in the Dark Ether. So most likely they have been very well aware of the entity for a long time and have been monitoring it, and they probably figured out a long time ago that the entity has a connection with Ava, but it was kept from her, of course. But now for the most interesting and heavily speculated debate that is revealed within this cutscene regarding Ava Jansen's birth parents. And even from this cutscene, it's still a bit confusing, but I'm going to try and explain what I think has happened here. So within the intel in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, we previously learned that Dr. Gray was apparently Ava's mother, but she gave her up for adoption when she was just 3 years old, likely because she has these Dark Ether powers, and likely due to her influence and exposure to the Dark Ether. So Ava Jansen was seemingly born in 1993, the same time as when the entity appeared. Then 3 years later, August 15th, 1996, as we learn from the radio in the game, is when Gray gives Ava up to adoption to a family whose last name are of course the Jansens, and they work for the CIA. As Ava began growing up, she started remembering things about Dr. Gray and started looking into her past, found out she was adopted, and started researching into Requiem, and that got her into her Ethereum research, which led her to where she is today. Now here's where things are very interesting. Whilst Dr. Gray birthed, she is apparently not her biological mother like we previously thought, and it is revealed in this cutscene that it's in fact Samantha Maxis. If you're unaware, throughout Cold War Zombies it was heavily implied that Samantha Maxis and Dr. Gray had some kind of love affair. In their radios they mentioned being more than friends. Samantha kept her jumper within Dr. Gray's locker. Gray cared so much about Samantha, looked after a dog not so fluffy, and so much more. There were so many implications there, and it seems confirmed with this cutscene pretty much now that it is true that they were having some kind of love interest there. Now obviously, because they're both females, they could not create a child, and so sperm had to be taken from Ravenov in order to create a child, and this was done via a process called assimilation. So Samantha's egg and Ravenov's sperm were likely bonded within a petri dish and then put inside Dr. Gray. So it does seem like Ravenov is the biological father, with Samantha Maxis being the biological mother, but Dr. Gray and Samantha Maxis are basically both her true parents. Whilst Ava Jansen was put up for adoption, Ravenov was tasked by them with watching over her, making sure she's safe, and he's been doing that throughout, and it does seem like Ravenov cares about her. However, it seems like he was never physically the one raising her, as they adopted her to the Jansens. Now here's where things get interesting. We're not sure if this was a consensual thing, but it seems like Richtofen was the one who forced this to happen. Jansen says, "My father, do you even think of me as a daughter? Or am I more of a liability?" Ava is of course very hurt by these revelations, but Ravenov reveals that Requiem took genetic samples from all of us, likely sperm and eggs from all of them too, with or without their consent. Of course, Requiem were exposed to high quantities of Ethereum throughout Cold War Zombies, and we know that high levels of Ethereum exposure give you dark ether powers, similar to what Ava Jansen and Samantha Maxis have. We learn that Ava Jansen is physically bonded with the dark ether. It's more than just a simple connection. It runs in her blood, and I guess the same can be said for Sam. And it seems like Richtofen was experimenting on them. For some reason, he probably wanted Ava to happen. So like I said, I'm really not sure whether Samantha Maxis as well as Dr. Gray consented to this. Was this something they wanted? We don't know if Ravenov gave his consent or not. Like I said, they took genetic samples from them with or without their consent. So this could have been something done without any of their consent. At the same time though, it's definitely a Richtofen thing to do to manipulate them. He did as such when he was interrogating Samantha Maxis throughout Cold War Zombies when she was put in containment. It really wouldn't be out of Richtofen's reach to say to Samantha and Dr. Gray, you can't have a biological child. This is your only way to do so. I propose this idea. I have a sample of Ravenov. We can do something here. But due to their high exposure to Ethereum, it's why Dr. Gray has ended up having dark ether powers. Now, of course, Samantha Maxis in 1985 also was trapped in the dark ether when she went in to contain the Forsaken. And that could also be a reason why Ava Jansen has a direct bond and connection with the dark ether, because her mother went into the dark ether when she was born, or even before she was born. Now again, that's also what doesn't make sense. Samantha Maxis was in the dark ether when Ava Jansen was seemingly conceived, so Samantha Maxis likely had her egg taken from her previously. However, like I said, it really wouldn't put it past me for Richtofen to try and manipulate Dr. Gray, saying this is the only way you can have a child with Sam. At the same time, he may have just forced this to happen. He may have just taken the egg from Sam as well as the sperm from Ravenov and forced it into Dr. Gray, which is literally the most cruel thing. This is such a dark storyline. But at the same time though, I really feel like Gray had some kind of consent in this. Well, not really proper consent, but some kind of say, but I think she was manipulated into it by Richtofen. Most likely she never knew Ava would end up having dark ether powers. This was probably something she found out afterwards. So yeah, this cutscene is so confusing, and it's really out there as to how she was conceived. Regardless though, it seems like Richtofen forced this to happen by this quote, the fact that the genetic samples were taken from them. Now, why Richtofen wanted this to happen is beyond me. Does it have something to do with Project Janus? Maybe it has something to do with the zombies that are being experimented on in canisters underneath Urzikstan. Maybe Richtofen is trying to create super soldiers. We're not exactly sure what his reason for these experiments were, but we will likely find out in Black Ops 6 Zombies. We know that in Roman mythology, the god Janus is depicted as having two heads, and is described as the god of gateways and transitions. Now that we know this information about Ava Jansen, this is how it could factor into Richtofen's Project Janus, and may even be why he codenamed it Janus to begin with. Because Ava essentially has two heads, herself and the shadow version, the entity in the dark ether, split across the two worlds, and maybe in her having a direct connection with the dark ether, it allows a gateway to be opened up between the two realms, and maybe this factors in to Eddie's plans. It seems very likely that he needs a gateway in order for Janus to happen, and maybe the only way that he's able to get a gateway is by forcing the birth of Ava and hence the entity due to tampering with the dark ether, and that could then reopen a gateway with the dark ether. This could be then to try and save his son Samuel, who may be in the dark ether, or for some other goal, but this is why he may have had Ava created to begin with. And in doing so, he's getting back at Samantha Maxis. Now, the other big revelation within this cutscene is that Dr. Gray confirms that the dark ether exposure is physically killing her. Now, we see that this pre-recorded message was recorded on the 15th of August 1996. So this is 11 years after the end of The Forsaken, the end of Cold War Zombies. Most likely this occurs soon to the end of Black Ops 6 Zombies. She knows that she is going to die due to the high Ethereum exposure. We know, of course, that Dr. Gray, Weaver, Carver, and Strauss all are deceased attached to an Ethereum device underneath Urzikstan that we see in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies' intro. Because they have all been exposed to the dark ether, Dr. Gray states in this cutscene that they are a danger to the world. So most likely they sacrificed their own lives and killed themselves, because most likely due to them being exposed to Ethereum, not only is it destroying them, but I feel like it's also allowing the connection to the dark ether itself. Maybe as the dark ether connection grows, it allows the dark ether to start breaching into the world again. Maybe the characters being exposed to Ethereum is the reason for why the zombies return in Black Ops 6 Zombies, and Richtofen proposes to them the idea of sacrificing themselves. Now maybe he wants them to sacrifice themselves for a different reason, and maybe what he's saying is even true, that they really are destroying the world due to this Ethereum exposure, but this might be the only way, even if it furthers his goals too, that might be unbeknownst to them. I hope that makes sense. It seems like in Black Ops 6 Zombies, the characters will be trying to rescue Samantha Maxis at some point too, but we know that they fail. Now another thing to point out, in this cutscene we see Dr. Grey, but she looks radically different from when we last saw her in Cold War Zombies. Now like I said, it is 11 years after we last saw her, but she seems to have aged considerably, way more than 11 years, and I'm wondering if the reason why she's aged so much so is due to that Ethereum exposure. It might be eating away at her and causing her to perish, and their sacrifice might be necessary. Now there's definitely something really important regarding this, because in the last cutscene with Ravenov and Ava expresses how Ravenov looks really young for his age. Of course, it's been literally like 40 years since the end of Cold War Zombies, and he's maybe only aged like half of that, and he's in really good shape. He has not aged naturally at all. I mean, Dr. Grey literally looks older than him in this cutscene, to be honest, or at least they look very similar ages, but Ravenov has been alive for literally twice as long, so that's definitely an important plot point. For some reason, Ravenov has youth properties, and I'm guessing that's got something similar to do with the Dark Ether exposure. So why are some people aging due to Dark Ether exposure, but others are aging slower? We know that in the Dark Ether, time passes slower at a different rate. Does Ravenov go in the Dark Ether for a certain period of time? Is there something else going on here? Maybe it's got something to do with Eddie Richtofen's experiments. Maybe that's why he was doing these experiments. He's trying to create some sort of drug that allows you to stay younger, or have enhanced powers, superpowers, or heal better. I'm not exactly sure, but these are all really big revelations here, and I can't wait for the next cutscene. Samantha Maxis is the biological mother of Ava Jansen. However, Dr. Grey was the one who actually birthed her. It seems like sperm was taken from Ravenov, whether he consented or not, and an egg was taken from Samantha and put into Dr. Grey. I feel like, as I was saying, that maybe Richtofen manipulated Dr. Grey into going through with this, and maybe manipulated Ravenov as well. Regardless of whether or not they were manipulated or whether they were pinned down and forced physically, in 1993, she ended up giving birth to this child, despite the fact that Samantha Maxis was in the Dark Ether at the time. Now, I imagine that the stress of her losing Samantha, of course everything going on with the zombies is a big reason why she's aged as well, but the same could be said for Ravenov, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. Now, there's also the other possibility that because DNA was taken from all of the Requiem heads, could they all potentially be the parents? That's what I thought in the past, but I'm leaning more so against that idea now, but that's another possibility. The characters did try and rescue Samantha at some point in Black Ops 6 Zombies, but they failed. Leading up to the 90s, Ravenov worked as a mob enforcer. Most likely these events were just so traumatic and he needed to make money somehow. Of course, the Requiem heads are being kept in a prison on Terminus Island in the Pacific after they were apprehended at the end of Cold War Zombies, and most likely this is when and where these experiments by Richtofen took place. And of course, in the Season 2 cutscene, when Ava is having this hallucination of Weaver and the rest of the Requiem heads in their deceased forms, they all have purple eyes, and this seems to suggest that yes, they are infected with the Dark Ether and have Dark Ether powers similar to Samantha as well as Ava, and that's why they sacrificed themselves. But are their souls potentially still in the Dark Ether, considering the fact that they appear in this hallucination? I feel like this hallucination has more to it than meets the eye, and I wonder if because their souls may still exist in the Dark Ether, they could return in the future. After recording this, I tried to make a summary post on Twitter collating all of my thoughts as well, so here it is, and it sounds absolutely batshit crazy. Anyways, like I've discussed, I believe Richtofen has Ravenov's sperm and Sam's egg extracted. While Samantha is trapped in the Dark Ether, he inseminates them and forces or convinces / manipulates Dr. Grey to carry the child. Like I said, he may say things to her like this is the only way you can have a child with Sam, especially whilst she is missing her so much, or maybe he says something along the lines of if you have the child, it will create a Dark Ether breach, giving you an opportunity to try and rescue her. Like I said, we know that they try and rescue Samantha in Black Ops 6 Zombies, but ultimately fail though. And maybe the way they are trying to rescue her could actually be in relation to Ava. Due to Requiem's Dark Ether exposure, and maybe because Sam is within the Dark Ether, when Ava is born, it causes her to be directly bonded with the Dark Ether, creating her shadow, aka the entity. This connection allows a large Dark Ether gateway to be opened up. This could be what is in West Virginia, as Richtofen has had the town shut down and he's building large tunnels and had the town completely walled off. Maybe maybe he cleared the town to make way for where he can set up a gateway, severing the barrier between the worlds that was closed at the end of Cold War Zombies. This is ultimately what I believe Eddie Richtofen wanted for Janus and is the main reason for all of this hassle. We know of course that Janus is the god of doors and gateways and is depicted as having two heads between realms, aka Ava and the Entity. We know that a gateway must factor into Janus, a large one at that, and this could be the way it's achieved. A large gateway may only be able to be opened when the Requiem heads sacrifice themselves. Like I said, it seems like they were dying due to Dark Ether exposure, as well as they pose a threat to the world, or posed. Likely, they were the reason for zombies existing in Black Ops 6 Zombies due to their connection. Whilst Eddie may be right in saying they need to die, the canisters could then be used for an ulterior motive of his. I'm still not sure exactly about the ins and outs of this. However, I do believe that whatever Eddie said to Requiem to convince them to sacrifice their lives was probably correct. However, it was probably not the full picture, and he had them do this for something for his own goal. I believe that he's using this large Dark Ether gateway to potentially try and rescue his son Samuel, who may have been trapped in the Dark Ether, maybe just his soul. After all, maybe when you die in the real world, your soul goes into the Dark Ether, and that could have been thanks to Weaver's failed assassination attempt of Richtofen, which we've speculated about happened prior to the events of Cold War Zombies. We also know that Richtofen seems to be doing other Dark Ether experiments and is likely the one who caused Zombies' chambers to be underneath Urzikstan. Whether they were there during Black Ops 6 Zombies or this happened after due to events he set in motion, I'm not really sure how this factors in though. I believe that the uber-rich group that we know are funding Project Janus that Eddie Richtofen is just using for his own goal are likely using the Dark Ether research to create superhumans to fight in war, maybe for immortality powers, which could factor into why Ravenov appears to have not aged as much. As to whether Richtofen wants this too, I'm not sure. Is he seeking total control of the Dark Ether like he used to have back in the Ether story? Again, I'm not exactly sure. I think there is more to Janus than just rescuing his son. I think that's part of it, but I think we're not seeing the bigger picture just yet. The Dark Ether story is really wild. And judging from these slight glimmers that we've gotten into Eddie Richtofen, the director, we don't really know much about him, of course, and we could be completely wrong, but from what we know, it seems like he may be the most calculated and twisted version we have seen yet. Ultimus Richtofen was completely insane, but we could write away his madness as him being completely crazy. He was not grounded at all and was so bombastic and over the top. But this new version may be much calmer, but even more sinister, and his thoughts may be a lot more collected. All Richtofens have been calculated, but this version seems way ahead of the game. So let me know all of your thoughts and theories on all of this in the comment section down below as always. But anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for latest and greatest Call of Duty news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.